The Tuesday afternoon sun shone bright over Riverside Shopping District. People walked in and out of stores, carrying bags and enjoying their day. Officer Derek Morrison sat in his patrol car watching the street. He had been a police officer for 7 years and thought he knew trouble when he saw it. That's when he noticed a black man in an army uniform walking down the sidewalk. The man walked with his back straight and his head held high. His uniform was perfectly pressed and medals decorated his chest. But Morrison didn't pay attention to any of that. All he saw was a black man in an expensive shopping area, and his mind immediately jumped to suspicion. Morrison got out of his car and started following the man. The officer's hand rested on his belt as he walked faster to catch up. The man in uniform stopped in front of a jewelry store and looked at the window display. He seemed to be thinking about something, his eyes focused on the rings and necklaces behind the glass. "Hey, you!" Morrison called out in a loud voice. "What are you doing here?" The man turned around slowly. His face showed surprise, but he remained calm. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm just shopping. Is there a problem?" Morrison stepped closer, his eyes narrow and suspicious. "Shopping? In this neighborhood? What's your business here?" The man kept his voice steady and respectful. "I'm looking for a graduation gift for my daughter. She's finishing medical school next month." "Sure you are," Morrison said with a smirk. "Let me see some ID right now." The man reached into his pocket carefully, making sure his movements were slow and visible. "Of course, officer. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm an Army colonel stationed at Fort Henderson." Morrison barely glanced at the military ID card that Thompson held out. "A colonel? Yeah, right. That uniform looks fake to me. Probably bought it at some costume shop. You know stolen valor is a crime, right?" Thompson's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Sir, I assure you this uniform is real. I've served in the military for 25 years. If you look at my ID, you'll see everything is legitimate." By now, several people on the street had stopped to watch. A woman pulled out her phone and started recording. Another person did the same. Morrison noticed the phones but didn't care. He was convinced he had caught someone doing something wrong. "I don't believe you," Morrison said, his voice getting louder. "What are you really doing here? Planning to rob that jewelry store?" Thompson's eyes widened in shock. "Rob? Officer, I'm a colonel in the United States Army. I'm here to buy a gift for my daughter. That's all. Stop lying to me," Morrison shouted. He grabbed Thompson's arm and spun him around roughly. "Put your hands on the window, now." Thompson did as he was told, placing his hands on the jewelry store window. His medals pressed against the glass, making a scraping sound. People in the crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey, that's not right," but Morrison ignored them. "Officer, please," Thompson said, his voice still controlled despite the situation. "You're making a mistake. Just look at my credentials. Call Fort Henderson. They'll confirm who I am." Morrison pushed Thompson harder against the window. "I said be quiet. You're in a lot of trouble here. Fake uniform, suspicious behavior, probably planning a crime." A young man in the crowd stepped forward. "Officer, he's telling the truth. Look at his uniform. Those are real medals. My dad was in the Army. I know what they look like." "Back up, citizen," Morrison yelled at the young man. "This doesn't concern you. Go about your business." More phones came out. At least 7 people were now recording the scene. The jewelry store owner came outside looking confused and worried. "Officer Morrison, what's going on? Is there a problem?" "Stay inside, Mr. Chen," Morrison ordered. "Police business." Thompson turned his head slightly. "Please, everyone, stay calm. Don't interfere. Let the officer do his job. There's been a misunderstanding, but it will get sorted out." Even while being treated so badly, Thompson remained dignified and composed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't struggle. He simply stood there, a decorated military officer being humiliated in public. Another police car pulled up. Officer Jennifer Martinez stepped out and walked over quickly. She saw Thompson against the window, saw Morrison's aggressive stance, and saw all the people recording. "Morrison, what's happening here?" Martinez asked. "Caught this guy in a fake uniform, probably casing the jewelry store," Morrison said proudly. "He claims he's an Army colonel. Can you believe that?" Martinez looked at Thompson more carefully. She saw his uniform, his medals, his rank insignia. Her eyes went wide. "Morrison, those are real. That's a colonel's uniform. Look at the eagles on his shoulders." "He could have bought all that," Morrison insisted. "I want him detained for questioning." Martinez shook her head. "Sir, can I see your ID, please?" she asked Thompson politely. Thompson handed it over without complaint. Martinez studied it carefully. Her face went pale. "Morrison, this is real. This is Colonel Marcus Thompson from Fort Henderson. He commands the 3rd Brigade." Morrison snatched the ID from her hand and looked at it. For a moment, his confidence wavered. But he was too far into this now. Could be a fake ID. We need to take him in and verify everything. "Officer Morrison," Thompson said quietly, "I'm going to ask you one more time to contact Fort Henderson. They will confirm my identity immediately. This situation doesn't need to escalate further." The crowd had grown to about 30 people. They stood in a semicircle, all watching, all recording. Some people looked angry. Others looked shocked. A few were crying. An older white man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. "Officer, I know Colonel Thompson. He spoke at my son's school last year about leadership. This is absolutely ridiculous. Let him go right now." Morrison's face turned red. He was angry, embarrassed, and stubborn. "Everyone needs to back up. This is an active police investigation." "Investigation of what?" a woman shouted from the crowd. "Shopping while black? He's in military uniform," another person yelled. "Show some respect." Thompson spoke up again, his voice carrying over the noise. "Please, everyone, remain calm. Getting angry won't help. Officer Morrison is doing what he thinks is right. Let's give him a chance to sort this out properly." Martinez pulled Morrison aside and whispered urgently to him. "Derek, you need to let this go. Look at all these people recording. This is going to be all over the news. That man is a real colonel. I can see it. You can see it." Let him go and apologize, but Morrison refused to back down. His pride wouldn't let him admit he was wrong. "No, we're taking him to the station to verify his story. If he's really a colonel, he'll be released. No harm done? No harm done?" Thompson said, finally showing a hint of frustration. "Officer, I've been accused of being a criminal, physically pushed against a window and humiliated in public while wearing my nation's uniform. All because I wanted to buy my daughter a graduation present." The crowd erupted in angry shouts. Martinez looked helpless. Morrison called for backup. Thompson stood there straight and proud even in this terrible moment. The phones kept recording. Every second was captured. Every word was saved. This moment would change many lives, but nobody knew it yet. The sun continued to shine on Riverside Shopping District, but something dark had happened there that afternoon. Something that couldn't be undone. Sarah Thompson sat in the library studying for her medical school finals when her phone started buzzing nonstop. Text messages flooded in from friends and classmates. Her hand shook as she read them. "Is this your dad? OMG, is he okay? I can't believe what I'm watching." She clicked on the first video link. Her heart stopped. There was her father, pressed against a jewelry store window, being treated like a criminal. The officer's voice came through clearly. "Fake uniform. Probably planning a crime." Sarah felt tears burning in her eyes. She grabbed her things and ran out of the library. Within 3 hours of the incident, 7 different videos appeared on social media. Each one showed the confrontation from a different angle. People shared them over and over. The hashtag Justice for Colonel Thompson started trending, first in Riverside, then across the state, then all over the country. Marcus Thompson sat in an interrogation room at the police station for 2 hours before they finally verified his identity. When Fort Henderson confirmed who he was, the chief of police rushed down to apologize. But Thompson's face remained expressionless. The damage was already done. "We're very sorry for the misunderstanding, Colonel," Chief Robert Walsh said nervously. "Officer Morrison made an error in judgment." "You're free to go, of course." Thompson stood up slowly. "An error in judgment? Chief Walsh, your officer accused me of stolen valor, assumed I was planning to commit a crime, and physically assaulted me, all while I was in my military uniform. That's not an error in judgment. That's racial profiling." The chief shifted uncomfortably. "We'll be conducting a full investigation, I assure you." Thompson walked out of the police station to find news cameras waiting. Reporters shouted questions at him. He held up his hand for silence and spoke calmly. "Today I experienced something that no American service member should ever face. I was targeted, humiliated, and detained simply because of the color of my skin. I've served this country for 25 years. I've led soldiers in combat. I've risked my life for the freedoms we all enjoy. And yet, I was treated as a criminal while wearing my nation's uniform." The clip played on every major news channel that night. The video views climbed into the millions. Comments poured in from people all over the world. Veterans were especially outraged. Retired generals and admirals spoke out. The Secretary of Defense released a statement calling the incident disturbing and unacceptable. Derek Morrison watched the news from his living room. His phone rang constantly, but he didn't answer. His social media accounts were flooded with angry messages. Someone found his old posts and screenshots started circulating. Jokes about black people, comments about certain neighborhoods being dangerous, complaints about diversity training being a waste of time. His police union representative called him. "Derek, this is bad, really bad. People are digging up everything. Your old posts are making it worse. The department is getting thousands of calls demanding you be fired." Morrison felt panic rising in his chest. "It was just a mistake. How was I supposed to know he was really a colonel? His uniform had colonel insignia on it, Derek. His medals were visible. Multiple witnesses said they tried to tell you. And now reporters found out you've had 12 complaints against you in 7 years. Why didn't you tell me about those?" Morrison had no good answer. He hung up and poured himself a drink. Then another. The walls felt like they were closing in. At Fort Henderson, Colonel Thompson arrived to find his entire brigade waiting for him. Over 3,000 soldiers stood at attention in formation. As he walked past, they saluted in perfect unison. Many had tears in their eyes. Their commander had been disrespected, and they felt it personally. Lieutenant James Rivera, who had served under Thompson in Afghanistan, spoke to reporters. "Colonel Thompson saved my life during an ambush in Kandahar. He carried me to safety under enemy fire. He's the best officer I've ever served with. What happened to him today is a disgrace." More stories emerged. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez talked about how Thompson mentored her when she was struggling. Captain David Chen described how Thompson helped him deal with PTSD after his second deployment. The picture painted was clear. Thompson was a leader who changed lives and inspired loyalty. Thompson's wife Lisa got home from her teaching job to find the house surrounded by reporters. She pushed through them without comment and locked the door. Inside, she found Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, still in his uniform. She had already seen the videos. She walked over and hugged him tight. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It's not your fault," Marcus said quietly. "This is the reality we live in. I just hoped wearing this uniform would make a difference." But to that officer, all he saw was a black man. Their son, Jason, who was 15, came downstairs. "Dad, everyone at school is talking about it. My friends are saying you're famous now." Marcus shook his head. "This isn't the kind of famous anyone wants to be, son." The Riverside Police Department's phone lines crashed from the volume of calls. Protesters began gathering outside the building. They held signs saying, "Respect our veterans and end racial profiling now." The crowd grew larger as evening approached. Inside the station, Chief Walsh held an emergency meeting. "We need to get ahead of this. Morrison is suspended with pay pending investigation. We'll issue a statement." But when the statement came out, it was weak and generic. "The Riverside Police Department takes all complaints seriously. We are investigating the incident and will take appropriate action based on our findings." People were furious. The statement didn't even mention Thompson by name. It didn't acknowledge racial profiling. It didn't promise real change. Social media exploded with anger. A reporter did some digging and found something important. Of the 12 previous complaints against Morrison, 8 involved people of color. 6 were completely dismissed. 4 led to meaningless written warnings. Not once was Morrison disciplined in any serious way. The department had protected him for 7 years while he continued to profile and harass minorities. Veterans organizations issued statements demanding justice. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People announced they were sending representatives to Riverside. The American Civil Liberties Union offered to represent Thompson if he wanted to file a lawsuit. The FBI field office said they were reviewing the case for possible civil rights violations. Morrison's partner, Officer Tom Bradley, gave an interview that made things worse for Morrison. "I worked with Derek for 3 years. I reported concerns about his behavior multiple times. He would target black and Hispanic drivers for traffic stops without good reason. He made inappropriate comments. I told our supervisors, but nothing changed." The police union tried to defend Morrison at first. Their president gave an interview saying officers make quick decisions under pressure, but the backlash was immediate and severe. Union members started calling in, saying they didn't want to be associated with Morrison's actions. The union quickly changed its position, and said they would not defend clear misconduct. By the end of the first day, the story was everywhere. National news, international news, social media, radio shows, podcasts. Everyone had an opinion. Most supported Thompson. A few tried to defend Morrison, but they were shouted down. Thompson's mother, Mary, who was 72 years old, gave an emotional interview. "I raised my son to serve his country with honor. He joined the army to escape poverty and make something of himself. He worked so hard to become a colonel, and then to be treated like this? My heart is broken." The jewelry store where the incident happened announced they were donating money to veterans' charities. The owner, Mr. Chen, said he felt terrible that it happened near his business. "Colonel Thompson is welcome in my store any time." What happened was wrong. As night fell on that first day, protests continued outside the police station. Candles were lit. Veterans in uniform stood silently holding American flags. Someone set up a large screen and played the video on repeat. Each time Morrison pushed Thompson against the window, the crowd groaned in pain and anger. Thompson watched some of the news coverage before turning it off. He didn't want to be a symbol or a hashtag. He just wanted to buy his daughter a graduation present. But now his life had changed forever. He couldn't take back what happened. He could only decide what to do next. Sarah arrived home late that night. She hugged her father and cried. "I'm so sorry, Dad. You didn't deserve that." Marcus held his daughter close. "No, I didn't. But maybe something good can come from this. Maybe this will help people understand what many Americans face every day." The video kept spreading. The view count kept climbing. The conversation kept growing, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. The morning after the incident, reporters dug deep into Marcus Thompson's background. What they found was a story that made what happened to him even more heartbreaking. This wasn't just any soldier who had been mistreated. This was a man who had overcome incredible odds to serve his country with distinction. Marcus Thompson grew up in the East Side neighborhood of Detroit. It was a rough area where gunshots at night were common, and police sirens were the soundtrack to daily life. His father left when Marcus was 3 years old. His mother, Mary, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She cleaned offices at night and worked at a grocery store during the day. Marcus was a quiet kid who loved to read. While other boys in the neighborhood got involved with gangs, Marcus spent his time at the library. His mother made sure of that. "Education is your way out," she told him every single day. "Study hard. Stay out of trouble. Make something of yourself." But it wasn't easy. Marcus saw friends get shot. He saw drugs destroy families. He saw police officers who assumed every black teenager was a criminal. By the time he was 16, he had been stopped and questioned by police at least 20 times, even though he had never committed a crime. When Marcus turned 18, he made a decision that changed his life. He walked into an army recruiting office and signed up. His mother cried when he told her. She was scared of losing him to war, but she was also proud. He was choosing a path that would take him away from the streets that had claimed so many young men. Basic training was hard, but Marcus thrived. His drill sergeants noticed something special about him. He was smart, disciplined, and natural leader. Other soldiers looked up to him. He helped struggling recruits and never complained. When his platoon needed someone to step up, Marcus was always first. After basic training, Marcus was assigned to the infantry. He studied hard and took every training opportunity he could get. He went to Ranger School and earned his tab. He attended leadership courses. He learned everything about being a soldier and a leader. While other soldiers spent their free time drinking or playing video games, Marcus was reading military history and studying tactics. His first deployment was to Iraq in 2003. He was 23 years old and scared, but he didn't show it. His squad relied on him. During a patrol in Fallujah, their convoy was ambushed. Insurgents opened fire from multiple buildings. Marcus's vehicle was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. The driver was wounded and panicking. Marcus pulled the driver to safety while bullets flew past his head. Then he grabbed the machine gun and returned fire, giving his squad time to find cover. He coordinated their response and called for backup. His actions that day saved lives. He received his first medal for valor, the Bronze Star. Over the next 25 years, Marcus deployed 5 more times. Twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. Each time he came back, he was a little different. He saw friends die. He saw civilians caught in crossfire. He saw the cost of war up close. But he never stopped believing in his mission and his duty to his country and his soldiers. Between deployments, Marcus worked on his education. He earned his bachelor's degree in history, then his master's in organizational leadership. He attended the Army's Command and General Staff College. He studied the great military leaders of history. He developed his own philosophy of leadership based on respect, discipline, and taking care of soldiers. Marcus married Lisa when he was 28. She was a teacher he met at a community center where he volunteered. She saw past his tough exterior and found a man with a gentle heart who cared deeply about making a difference. They had 2 children, Sarah and Jason. Marcus was deployed for much of their childhood, but when he was home, he was fully present. He helped with homework, coached soccer, and taught his children about character and integrity. His soldiers loved him. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez, who served under Thompson as a young lieutenant, told reporters about the man he knew. Colonel Thompson saved my career. I was struggling with alcohol after my first deployment. Instead of writing me up, he sat me down and talked to me like a human being. He got me help. He checked on me every week. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I've been sober for 12 years because of him. Stories like this poured in from dozens of soldiers. Private First Class Williams talked about how Thompson mentored her when she was the only woman in her platoon. Sergeant Martinez described how Thompson helped him deal with PTSD. Captain Lewis explained how Thompson taught him to be a better leader. The pattern was clear. Thompson didn't just command soldiers, he transformed lives. By age 40, Marcus was a lieutenant colonel. By 45, he earned his full colonel rank. He commanded a brigade of over 3,000 soldiers. His evaluation reports were outstanding. His superiors called him one of the finest officers in the Army. He was being considered for promotion to brigadier general. 3 days after the incident, Marcus agreed to do a television interview. He sat across from a reporter in his living room wearing his uniform. His wife sat beside him holding his hand. "Colonel Thompson, tell us how you felt when Officer Morrison pushed you against that window," the reporter asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "I felt humiliated, angry, disappointed, but mostly I felt sad. Sad that after everything I've done for this country, I was still seen as a threat because of my skin color." "Were you afraid?" "Yes, I was afraid that if I made one wrong move, the situation could escalate. I've seen videos of police shootings. I know how quickly things can go wrong. So I stayed calm. I complied with every order. I kept my hands visible. I did everything right, and I was still treated like a criminal." Lisa wiped tears from her eyes. "I worry every day about my husband and my son. When Marcus wears his uniform, I think he's safe. I think people will see a decorated soldier and treat him with respect." But this showed me that even the uniform doesn't protect him from racism. The interviewer turned to Sarah, who had joined them. "Sarah, you're about to graduate from medical school. What went through your mind when you saw the video?" Sarah's voice shook as she spoke. "My father is my hero. He's the strongest, bravest person I know. Seeing him treated that way broke my heart. He taught me to serve others, to work hard, to never give up. He's everything a man should be, and some police officers saw him as nothing but a threat." The interview was watched by millions. People saw Thompson not as a hashtag or a viral video, but as a real person. A father, a husband, a leader. A man who dedicated his life to serving his country. Marcus's childhood friends from Detroit reached out. His old basketball coach, Mr. Johnson, told reporters about young Marcus. That boy had every reason to go down the wrong path. But he chose differently. He had character even as a teenager. "I'm not surprised he became a colonel. I'm just heartbroken that he was treated so badly." The principal of Sarah's high school invited Marcus to speak to students. He talked about perseverance, about choosing the right path even when it's hard, about serving something bigger than yourself. The students gave him a standing ovation. Many came up afterward to shake his hand and thank him for his service. Marcus also spoke at his old elementary school in Detroit. He stood in front of kids from the same tough neighborhood where he grew up. "I know life isn't fair," he told them. "I know some people will judge you by how you look instead of who you are. But don't let that stop you. Work hard, stay focused, be better than people expect. That's how you win." A young boy raised his hand. "Mr. Colonel, sir, are you scared of the police now?" Marcus paused, thinking about his answer carefully. "I'm cautious, but I don't hate police officers. Most of them do a hard job with honor. One bad officer doesn't represent all of them, just like one person doesn't represent an entire race. We have to judge people as individuals, not make assumptions based on stereotypes. Veterans groups rallied around Thompson. The Veterans of Foreign Wars gave him an award. The American Legion invited him to speak at their national convention. Retired generals wrote articles praising his service and condemning how he was treated. A petition demanding justice for him gathered over 1 million signatures, but through it all, Marcus remained humble and measured. He didn't call for revenge. He didn't attack all police. He simply asked for accountability and change. "This isn't about me getting revenge," he said in another interview. "This is about making sure it doesn't happen to others. This is about fixing a broken system." His mother Mary gave an interview from her small apartment in Detroit. Photos on her walls showed Marcus through the years, in his first uniform receiving medals at his promotion ceremonies. "I'm so proud of my son," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "He made it out. He became something special. And the fact that he was still treated like a criminal, that tells you everything about what's wrong in this country." As Marcus's story spread, it became clear that this wasn't just about one incident. It was about the experience of Black Americans who served their country and still face discrimination. It was about the gap between the ideal of equality and the reality of racism, and Marcus Thompson, with his dignity and grace, became the face of that larger conversation. He didn't ask for this role. He just wanted to buy his daughter a graduation present, but now he had a platform, and he was determined to use it to make a difference. The Riverside Police Department's Internal Affairs Division opened its investigation on Thursday morning, 2 days after the incident. Detective Carol Stevens was assigned to lead it. She was a 20-year veteran known for being thorough and fair. When she pulled Derek Morrison's file, her heart sank at what she found. 12 complaints in 7 years. 12 times that citizens had reported Morrison for inappropriate behavior. Detective Stevens spread the files across her desk and started reading. What she discovered made her angry at her own department. The first complaint came from an elderly Black woman named Mrs. Johnson. Morrison had pulled her over for a broken taillight. According to her statement, he searched her car without permission and made comments suggesting she might be carrying drugs. She wasn't. She was a retired nurse driving home from church. The complaint was marked unsubstantiated and dismissed. The second complaint involved a Hispanic teenager named Carlos Martinez. Morrison stopped him for skateboarding in a public park. Carlos said Morrison grabbed him roughly, pushed him to the ground, and accused him of gang activity because of his clothing. Carlos had no criminal record. He was an honor student. The complaint was marked insufficient evidence and filed away. Detective Stevens read through all 12 complaints. 8 involved people of color. The pattern was obvious. Morrison repeatedly targeted minorities without reasonable cause. He made assumptions based on race. He used excessive force for minor situations. And each time the department had protected him, she found something else disturbing. 3 different officers had reported concerns about Morrison over the years. His former partner, Officer Tom Bradley, had filed internal memos warning that Morrison's behavior could lead to a serious incident. A training supervisor noted that Morrison showed resistance to diversity training and made inappropriate jokes. A sergeant wrote that Morrison seemed to have biases that affected his policing. All of these warnings were in his file. All of them had been ignored. Morrison received written counseling twice, but nothing more. He was never suspended, never required to take additional training, never faced any real consequences. The department had failed to hold him accountable, and now it had led to a national scandal. Detective Stevens presented her findings to Chief Walsh. His face went pale as he listened. "This is bad, Carol, really bad. If this gets out, we're looking at massive liability." "It's already getting out, Chief," Stevens replied. "Reporters are filing public records requests. They're going to find all of this. The question is what we do about it." The next day, a civil rights attorney named David Chen held a press conference. He had been hired by Colonel Thompson to file a federal lawsuit. Chen was well known for taking on police misconduct cases and winning. "Today we are filing a lawsuit against Officer Derek Morrison and the Riverside Police Department," Chen announced to the cameras. "This lawsuit alleges violation of Colonel Thompson's constitutional rights, including his Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, and his 14th Amendment right to equal protection under the law. He held up a thick document. Through discovery, we have already uncovered a pattern of complaints against Officer Morrison that the department ignored. We will prove that the Riverside Police Department had actual knowledge of Morrison's discriminatory behavior and failed to take appropriate action. This constitutes deliberate indifference to civil rights violations. The lawsuit asked for damages but also demanded systemic reforms. Chen explained that Thompson wanted to ensure this never happened to anyone else. The case would shine a spotlight on every failure of the police department's oversight and accountability systems. Reporters started digging deeper into Morrison's background. They found his social media posts that had been deleted, but screenshots had been saved. Comments about Black Lives Matter protesters being criminals, jokes about racial stereotypes, complaints about mandatory diversity training being politically correct nonsense. One post said, "Tired of being told I'm racist just for doing my job. Some neighborhoods are more dangerous, that's just facts." The posts were damning. They showed Morrison's mindset clearly. He saw people of color as threats. He resented being told to examine his biases. He believed his prejudiced assumptions were justified by statistics, without understanding how those statistics reflected systemic problems. Morrison's attorney, a former prosecutor named Bill Harrison, tried to defend him. "My client made an honest mistake in judgment. He thought he saw something suspicious and investigated. He didn't know the man was truly a colonel." But reporters pressed him. The colonel was wearing a uniform with clear rank insignia. Multiple witnesses say they told Officer Morrison he was wrong. Why didn't he listen? Harrison had no good answer. Police officers make split-second decisions under pressure. It's easy to judge after the fact. This wasn't a split-second decision, a reporter countered. This went on for over 15 minutes. Officer Morrison had plenty of time to look at the ID, check the uniform, or call Fort Henderson. Why didn't he? The attorney changed his strategy. Officer Morrison deeply regrets how this situation unfolded. He's not a racist. He's served his community for 7 years. But former colleagues weren't backing Morrison up. Officer Tom Bradley gave another interview. "I worked with Derek for 3 years. I saw how he treated people of color differently. I reported it to supervisors at least 5 times. Nothing changed. The department didn't want to deal with it." "Why didn't they take action?" the reporter asked. Bradley shook his head sadly. "The union protects problem officers. The department doesn't want complaints to affect their statistics. It's easier to dismiss complaints than to discipline officers. Until there's a major incident that goes public, they just look the other way." His words hit hard because they exposed not just Morrison's misconduct, but systemic failures throughout the department. This wasn't about one bad officer. It was about an institution that protected him. The police union initially tried to defend Morrison. Their president, Frank Sullivan, gave an interview saying officers deserve due process. But union members started calling in to complain. Many good officers were angry that Morrison's actions reflected badly on all of them. Officer Jennifer Martinez, who had responded to the scene, spoke out. "I'm tired of officers like Morrison making the rest of us look bad. I became a cop to serve my community, not to profile people. What he did was wrong, and we all know it." Within days, the union quietly withdrew its strong support for Morrison. Sullivan released a new statement saying the union wouldn't defend clear misconduct, and members who violated civil rights would have to face consequences. The FBI got involved, sending agents to interview witnesses. Federal civil rights violations carried serious penalties. Special Agent Williams explained to reporters, "When a police officer violates someone's civil rights under color of law, it's a federal crime. We take these cases very seriously." Meanwhile, more victims of Morrison's behavior came forward. A black businessman named Terrence Washington said Morrison had pulled him over 6 times in 2 years for minor violations. Every time he'd ask where I was going, where I worked, if the car was really mine. He treated me like a criminal when I was just driving to work. A Latina woman named Rosa Gutierrez described being stopped while walking her dog. "He asked me if I was in the country legally. I was born in Riverside. I've lived here my whole life. He made me feel like I didn't belong in my own neighborhood." The stories kept coming. Each one added to the picture of an officer who saw people of color as suspects rather than citizens. The pattern was undeniable. Morrison had harassed dozens, maybe hundreds of people over 7 years. Colonel Thompson was just the one incident that got caught on video and went viral. Chief Walsh held a press conference trying to calm the situation. "We are taking this matter very seriously. We've suspended Officer Morrison pending the outcome of our investigation and any criminal proceedings. We're also reviewing our training procedures and complaint processes." But protesters outside the police station weren't satisfied. They chanted, "Justice for Colonel Thompson. Fire Morrison now. Reform the department." Community leaders demanded more than just Morrison's firing. Reverend James Mitchell, who led the local NAACP chapter, spoke at a city council meeting. "This isn't about one officer. This is about a department that ignored complaints for 7 years. This is about a system that protects bad cops instead of protecting the community. We demand real accountability and real change." The city council members looked uncomfortable. They knew the city faced massive liability. The lawsuit would cost millions. But more importantly, they had lost the community's trust. Council member Patricia Rodriguez spoke up. "We need an independent investigation and civilian oversight. The police department can't police itself anymore." Detective Stevens continued her investigation, but she knew where it was heading. The evidence was overwhelming. Morrison had violated department policy, state law, and federal civil rights law. His history of complaints showed a pattern. The department's failure to act on those complaints showed negligence. She wrote her report carefully, documenting everything. When she submitted it to Chief Walsh, she included a recommendation: termination and criminal prosecution. Walsh read it and knew his own job was probably on the line too. He had been chief for 4 years. All these complaints had happened on his watch. Morrison sat in his house watching his life fall apart. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided him. His wife had taken the kids to her mother's house. He drank too much and slept too little. He kept telling himself he hadn't done anything wrong, but deep down he knew the truth. The investigation was tightening like a noose around not just Morrison, but around everyone who had protected him. The department, the union, the supervisors who dismissed complaints, they all faced scrutiny. The incident with Colonel Thompson had pulled back a curtain, revealing years of failure and neglect. And everyone waited to see what justice would look like. The town hall meeting at Riverside Community Center was packed. Over 500 people filled the auditorium, with another 100 standing in the hallways. The air felt heavy with emotion. People came to speak, to listen, and to demand change. Mayor Linda Foster stood at the podium, looking out at the angry, hurt faces in the crowd. "We're here tonight to listen, to understand, and to begin the process of healing and reform. What happened to Colonel Thompson cannot be ignored or forgotten. It's time for our community to face some hard truths." She invited people to come to the microphone and share their experiences. The first person to stand was an older black man named Robert Harris. His hands shook slightly as he held the microphone. "I'm 70 years old," he began. "I've lived in Riverside for 45 years. I'm a retired postal worker. I've been stopped by police in this town at least 30 times. Sometimes for driving too slow, sometimes for driving too fast, once for looking at houses in a nice neighborhood. The officer asked what I was doing there, like I didn't belong. Every time I'm treated with suspicion instead of respect." The crowd murmured in recognition. Other heads nodded. Robert continued, "What happened to Colonel Thompson didn't surprise me. It hurt me, but it didn't surprise me, because this is what black people face every day in this town." Next came Maria Santos, a young Hispanic woman. "I'm a nurse at Riverside General. I save lives every day. But 2 months ago, Officer Morrison pulled me over at 10 at night. He asked where I was coming from, where I was going. He looked in my car with his flashlight. He asked if I had drugs. I was wearing my scrubs with my hospital ID badge. But all he saw was a Hispanic woman in an old car, and he assumed I was a criminal." The stories continued for 2 hours. A black teenager described being followed in stores. An Asian businessman talked about being asked where he was really from, even though he was born in Riverside. A mixed-race couple shared how they were stared at and questioned by police when walking in their own neighborhood at night. White residents who had never experienced this treatment listened in shock. Jennifer Caldwell, a teacher, stood up crying. "I had no idea. I've lived here my whole life, and police have always been polite to me. I didn't know my neighbors were going through this. I'm ashamed that I didn't see it." Her honesty touched people. This was what the community needed. Uncomfortable conversations that exposed the different realities people lived based on the color of their skin. Chief Walsh had to sit on the stage and listen to it all. People called out his department by name. They wanted to know why complaints were ignored, why Morrison was still on the force after 12 complaints, why the department seemed to protect bad officers instead of serving the community. When it was his turn to speak, Walsh's voice was heavy. "I've failed you. I've been chief for 4 years, and I didn't do enough to address these problems. I didn't take complaints seriously enough. I didn't hold officers accountable. I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's where I have to start." The crowd wasn't gentle with him. People shouted questions, demanded answers, asked why it took a viral video for him to care. Walsh took it all. He deserved it. He knew that. After the town hall, something unexpected happened. Colonel Thompson reached out to the police department and offered to help. "I don't want revenge," he told Chief Walsh in a private meeting. "I want change. Real change. And I have experience training people, managing large organizations, and building culture. Let me help you fix this." Walsh was surprised but grateful. "You'd be willing to work with us after what happened?" Thompson looked him in the eye. "I'm a soldier. Soldiers fix problems. They don't just complain about them. If my experience can help prevent this from happening to someone else, then something good comes from my pain." Over the next month, Thompson worked with the police department to develop new training programs. He brought his military expertise in cultural competency and leadership. He designed scenarios based on real situations where officers had to confront their assumptions and biases. He didn't do it alone. He brought in other veterans of color who had served their country. He invited community leaders to participate. He created a program that was honest, challenging, and effective. It wasn't about making officers feel guilty. It was about helping them see people as individuals rather than stereotypes. The training sessions were intense. Officers sat in circles and listened to stories from community members. They heard about the fear parents of color felt when teaching their children how to interact with police. They learned about the historical context of racism in policing. They practiced de-escalation techniques and respectful communication. Some officers resisted. They thought it was political correctness gone too far. But others had breakthroughs. Officer Sarah Kim, a 5-year veteran, shared with the group, "I realize now that I've made assumptions. I've pulled over more cars in certain neighborhoods. I've been quicker to see threat in people who look different from me. I thought I was just being careful, but I was actually being prejudiced." Her honesty opened the door for other officers to admit their own biases. The training created a space where officers could be honest without being destroyed, but also where they had to face hard truths about their behavior. Meanwhile, the city council passed new reforms. They created a civilian oversight board with real power to investigate complaints. They required all officers to wear body cameras at all times. They changed the complaint process to make it easier for citizens to report misconduct. They allocated money for ongoing training and community engagement. Council member David Torres led the reform effort. "We have to rebuild trust," he said at a council meeting. "That means transparency. That means accountability. That means listening to the people we serve." The reforms weren't popular with everyone. Some officers felt they were being punished for Morrison's actions. The police union pushed back against some of the oversight measures. But public pressure was strong, and the reforms moved forward. Local businesses joined the effort. The jewelry store owner, Mr. Chen, organized other business owners to participate in community dialogue sessions. They talked about their role in either challenging or accepting discriminatory behavior. Several stores changed their training for employees on how to treat all customers with respect. The owner of a coffee shop near where the incident happened, Elizabeth Park, started a program where police officers and community members could meet informally to talk. "We need to see each other as human beings," she explained. "Not as threats or enemies, but as neighbors." Churches, mosques, and synagogues held joint services focused on justice and reconciliation. Riverside High School added curriculum about civil rights and racial justice. The library hosted film screenings and book discussions. The whole community was engaged in a conversation that was long overdue. Thompson spoke at many of these events. He didn't speak with anger, but with wisdom and patience. "Change is hard," he told a group of young people. "It requires us to look at ourselves honestly and admit where we've been wrong. But that's how we grow. That's how we become better." His daughter, Sarah, graduated from medical school during this time. The ceremony was emotional. When Sarah walked across the stage to receive her diploma, The entire audience stood and applauded. It was partly for her achievement, but also to honor her father who had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for community transformation. Thompson finally got to buy Sarah her graduation gift. He went back to the same jewelry store. Mr. Chen welcomed him warmly and helped him pick out a beautiful necklace. This time, there were no police confrontations, no assumptions, just a transaction between two people treating each other with respect. The reforms in Riverside started getting attention from other cities. Police departments around the country reached out to learn about their training program. Thompson became a sought-after speaker at law enforcement conferences. His message was always the same. Respect and dignity cost nothing, but their absence costs everything. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some people thought the reforms went too far. Others thought they didn't go far enough. But the community was moving forward together, having difficult conversations and making real changes. 6 months after the incident, crime rates in Riverside hadn't increased as some feared. In fact, community cooperation with police improved. When people trust the police, they're more willing to report crimes and serve as witnesses. The reforms made the community safer, not more dangerous. Thompson continued his military service while also serving as an advisor to the Riverside Police Department. It was exhausting work, but he felt it was his duty. Just as he had served his country in combat, he was now serving his community in this different kind of battle. One evening, he sat with his wife Lisa on their back porch. "Do you think it was worth it?" she asked. "All the pain, all the publicity, all the work." Marcus thought about it. "I wouldn't have chosen this, but since it happened, I'm glad we could turn it into something positive. That officer saw me as a threat because of my skin color, but now maybe some officers think twice before making that assumption. Maybe some black kid won't get hurt because an officer took this training seriously. If that's true, then yes, it was worth it." The work of reform was just beginning, but Riverside was showing that change was possible. It required courage, honesty, and commitment. Most importantly, it required people like Marcus Thompson who chose to build bridges instead of walls, even after being hurt. The courtroom was quiet as Judge Patricia Morrison read the charges. Derek Morrison, no relation to the judge, stood in his cheap suit looking smaller than he had in his police uniform. His attorney stood beside him, briefcase in hand, knowing this was a battle they couldn't win. "Mr. Morrison, you are charged with assault, violation of civil rights under color of law, and official misconduct. How do you plead?" Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. "Guilty, Your Honor." The plea deal had been negotiated over weeks. Morrison would plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for avoiding prison time. He would receive 2 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from working in law enforcement anywhere in the country. Judge Morrison looked at him sternly. "Mr. Morrison, you violated the trust that comes with wearing a badge. You targeted a decorated military officer based on the color of his skin. You humiliated him publicly and caused him significant emotional distress. You are fortunate that Colonel Thompson is a gracious man who did not seek the maximum punishment." Morrison nodded, his eyes on the floor. The judge continued, "As part of your community service, you will work with organizations that serve communities of color. You will learn what it means to see people as individuals rather than stereotypes. Perhaps through this experience, you will become a better person." After the sentencing, Morrison was required to make a public apology. He stood before cameras outside the courthouse reading from a prepared statement. "I apologize to Colonel Thompson and his family for my actions. I made terrible assumptions based on prejudice. I failed as a police officer and as a human being. I'm sorry for the pain I caused." His words sounded hollow even to himself. He had been caught and punished, but true understanding still escaped him. He blamed his training, the stress of the job, the department for not helping him. Taking full responsibility for his racism was still beyond his capacity. Colonel Thompson watched the apology on television from his home. Lisa sat beside him. "Do you think he means it?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't think he understands what he did wrong, not really. But that's not my concern anymore. He lost his career. He has a criminal record. He's been publicly shamed. That will follow him forever. My focus is on making sure there are fewer officers like him in the future." The civil lawsuit was settled 2 weeks later. The city of Riverside agreed to pay Thompson $2 million. It was a massive settlement that made headlines, but Thompson had already decided what to do with the money. He held a press conference to announce the creation of the Thompson Leadership Scholarship Fund. The entire settlement would go toward providing college scholarships for minority students who wanted to pursue careers in military service or public service fields. This money didn't come from a lottery, Thompson explained to the reporters. It came from my pain and humiliation. I don't want to profit from that. I want something good to come from it. If this money helps young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get an education and serve their communities, then my experience will have meaning. The announcement moved people deeply. Donations poured in from across the country. Veterans organizations contributed. Corporations matched funds. Within a month, the scholarship fund had grown to over $5 million. It would help hundreds of students for years to come. Sarah Thompson was one of the first people to speak at the scholarship announcement. My father taught me that service is the highest calling. Not just military service, but any work that makes the world better. These scholarships will help young people follow that calling, regardless of their background or the color of their skin. 1 month after the settlement, a special ceremony was held at Fort Henderson. The Secretary of Defense came in person. Generals and admirals attended. The entire brigade stood in formation. Secretary James Mitchell approached the podium with a serious expression. Colonel Thompson, you have served this nation with distinction for 25 years. You have led soldiers in combat. You have mentored young officers. You have represented the best of what our military stands for. Recently, you were disrespected while wearing your uniform. That disrespect was an insult not just to you, but to everyone who serves. He turned to face Thompson directly. On behalf of the President of the United States and the Department of Defense, I apologize. You deserved better. Every service member deserves better. We commit to working harder to ensure that wearing our nation's uniform commands the respect it has earned. The Secretary pinned an additional medal on Thompson's uniform, the Defense Superior Service Medal for his work on police reform and community building. The brigade erupted in applause. Many soldiers had tears in their eyes. Their commander had been vindicated. Thompson's voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. I accept this apology on behalf of all service members of color who have faced similar treatment. We serve our country with pride, and we deserve to be seen as patriots and heroes, not as threats. Thank you for acknowledging that. The ceremony was covered by every major news outlet. The image of the Secretary of Defense apologizing to Thompson became iconic. It represented accountability and the acknowledgement of a wrong that needed to be made right. Meanwhile, the reforms in Riverside continued to take root. The new Civilian Oversight Board investigated its first cases, finding problems in how some officers handled situations. 2 officers received additional training. 1 was suspended for using excessive force. The message was clear. Accountability was real now. Chief Walsh announced his retirement 6 months after the incident. In his farewell speech, he was honest about his failures. I should have done more. I should have listened better. I should have held officers accountable. I hope my successor learns from my mistakes and builds a department that truly serves everyone in this community. The new police chief, Maria Rodriguez, was a Latina woman with a reputation for reform and community engagement. Her first act was to meet with community leaders, including Thompson. She listened more than she talked. She asked questions. She made it clear that things would be different. Under Chief Rodriguez, the department continued to improve. Use of force incidents decreased. Community complaints dropped. Positive interactions between police and residents increased. The training program Thompson helped create became mandatory for all officers, including those who had been on the force for years. Thompson's work as a consultant to police departments expanded. He traveled to cities across the country, helping them improve their training and community relationships. His military background gave him credibility with law enforcement, while his personal experience gave him credibility with communities of color. He spoke at the FBI Training Academy, teaching future agents about civil rights and respectful policing. He addressed the National Police Chiefs Association, challenging them to confront racism in their ranks. He testified before Congress about the need for federal standards for police conduct. His voice became influential in the national conversation about policing reform, but he never forgot where he came from. He still visited his old neighborhood in Detroit, speaking to kids about choices and character. He mentored young officers who wanted to be better. He worked with veterans of color who faced discrimination. He turned his pain into purpose. Sarah completed her residency and opened a medical practice in an underserved community. She said her father's experience motivated her to serve people who were often overlooked or mistreated. Jason, now in college, was studying criminal justice and wanted to become a prosecutor who would hold bad police officers accountable. Morrison completed his community service hours at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood. He tutored kids with their homework and heard their stories about encounters with police. Slowly, very slowly, he began to understand. The kids he worked with weren't threats or criminals. They were just kids trying to grow up in a world that often saw them as dangerous. One day, near the end of his service hours, a boy asked him, "Mr. Morrison, why are you here?" Morrison thought about lying, but something in the boy's eyes made him tell the truth. "I did something very wrong. I hurt someone because I judged them by their skin color instead of their character. I'm here to try to understand what I did and become a better person." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "My dad says everyone makes mistakes. It's what you do after that matters." Those words stayed with Morrison. He would never be a police officer again. He would never fully repair the damage he had caused. But maybe, just maybe, he could become someone who understood what he had done wrong and tried to do better. 2 years after the incident, Thompson was promoted to Brigadier General. At his promotion ceremony, he reflected on his journey. "The path to this moment hasn't been easy. I've faced obstacles that had nothing to do with my abilities or my character. But I never let those obstacles define me. I kept serving. I kept leading. I kept believing in what this country can be even when it fell short of that ideal." He looked out at the soldiers and civilians gathered for the ceremony. "We all have a choice when we face injustice. We can become bitter and angry, or we can work to make things better. I chose to build bridges. I chose to educate. I chose to serve. That choice has made all the difference." The Riverside incident became a case study taught in police academies, military leadership courses, and civil rights classes. It showed how one moment of prejudice could spark change, how dignity in the face of disrespect could inspire reform, how pain could be transformed into purpose. The jewelry store where it all happened put up a small plaque. It read, "In this place, Colonel Marcus Thompson was unjustly detained. His grace in that moment sparked a movement for change. May we never forget that dignity, respect, and equality are not privileges to be granted, but rights to be protected." People would stop and read the plaque, taking photos and reflecting. It became a reminder that change was possible, but only if people had the courage to demand it and the wisdom to build it. Thompson continued to serve his country and his community for many more years. He never sought fame or recognition. He simply did what he thought was right. The incident that could have destroyed him became instead a catalyst for transformation, both in himself and in the communities he touched. His legacy wasn't just the reforms he inspired or the scholarships he funded. It was the countless conversations he started, the minds he changed, and the example he set. He showed that true strength wasn't in domination or revenge, but in grace, wisdom, and the commitment to make the world better than you found it. And on quiet evenings, when he sat on his porch with Lisa watching the sunset, he felt at peace. The journey had been painful, but it had mattered. He had served his country on battlefields overseas and on the streets of Riverside. Both required courage. Both required sacrifice. Both made a difference. That was enough. Morrison completed his community service hours at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood. He tutored kids with their homework and heard their stories about encounters with police. Slowly, very slowly, he began to understand. The kids he worked with weren't threats or criminals. They were just kids trying to grow up in a world that often saw them as dangerous. One day, near the end of his service hours, a boy asked him, "Mr. Morrison, why are you here?" Morrison thought about lying, but something in the boy's eyes made him tell the truth. "I did something very wrong. I hurt someone because I judged them by their skin color instead of their character. I'm here to try to understand what I did and become a better person." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "My dad says everyone makes mistakes. It's what you do after that matters." Those words stayed with Morrison. He would never be a police officer again. He would never fully repair the damage he had caused. But maybe, just maybe, he could become someone who understood what he had done wrong and tried to do better. 2 years after the incident, Thompson was promoted to Brigadier General. At his promotion ceremony, he reflected on his journey. The path to this moment hasn't been easy. I've faced obstacles that had nothing to do with my abilities or my character. But I never let those obstacles define me. I kept serving. I kept leading. I kept believing in what this country can be even when it fell short of that ideal. He looked out at the soldiers and civilians gathered for the ceremony. We all have a choice when we face injustice. We can become bitter and angry, or we can work to make things better. I chose to build bridges. I chose to educate. I chose to serve. That choice has made all the difference. The Riverside incident became a case study taught in police academies, military leadership courses, and civil rights classes. It showed how one moment of prejudice could spark change, how dignity in the face of disrespect could inspire reform, how pain could be transformed into purpose. The jewelry store where it all happened put up a small plaque. It read, "In this place, Colonel Marcus Thompson was unjustly detained. His grace in that moment sparked a movement for change. May we never forget that dignity, respect, and equality are not privileges to be granted, but rights to be protected." People would stop and read the plaque, taking photos and reflecting. It became a reminder that change was possible, but only if people had the courage to demand it and the wisdom to build it. Thompson continued to serve his country and his community for many more years. He never sought fame or recognition. He simply did what he thought was right. The incident that could have destroyed him became instead a catalyst for transformation, both in himself and in the communities he touched. His legacy wasn't just the reforms he inspired or the scholarships he funded. It was the countless conversations he started, the minds he changed, and the example he set. He showed that true strength wasn't in domination or revenge, but in grace, wisdom, and the commitment to make the world better than you found it. And on quiet evenings, when he sat on his porch with Lisa watching the sunset, he felt at peace. The journey had been painful, but it had mattered. He had served his country on battlefields overseas and on the streets of Riverside. Both required courage. Both required sacrifice. Both made a difference. That was enough.